Today, we are going to make one fan base very, very, very upset. Will that fan base be A, Kansas, B, UCLA, C, Auburn, or D, UConn? If you think you know the answer, you probably already have a decent grasp on what a blue blood is. Hi, I'm Professor Bounce, and today, in Hoops Southbound's College Basketball 201 series, we're talking about what a blue blood is and talking about some of the blue bloods in college basketball. Now, before we get started, let's do the YouTube thing. If you like college basketball, please like and subscribe to the channel. We have the show, series like these, and other stuff covering basketball in the SEC coming out every week. Now, let's define what a blue blood is. Well, it's sort of like, well, I guess we're going to have to rely on some history to define this, aren't we? Once upon a time, and not within the world of sports, the term blue blood was used as a reference to royalty or aristocracy. Fast forward a lot, and the term is applied similarly to basketball teams that are considered some of the most elite in the country. So that's sort of the base for this. The best teams in the country are the ones considered blue bloods, and we can see this throughout the term's history. The oldest example of the term blue blood being used in college basketball dates back to 1927 in New York. In the Times-Union in Brooklyn, New York, a sub-headline read, "Central's made up of basketball blue bloods." Back then, the term was used in reference to specific talented players rather than teams. This usage of the phrase wasn't uncommon in the early 20th century, according to Andy Wittry. He says that back in the day, the usage of the term was very fuzzy, much like it is today. But kind of like today, when you hear the term, you've got an idea of what it means. The oldest example in reference to college basketball dates back to 1946 in the Charlotte News. A man named Dick Dunkel had a men's basketball rating system, which the Charlotte News described as his basketball blue blood list. This list was not crowning the best teams in college basketball historically, but rather it was meant to rank the teams much like the AP poll does today. And during this time period, the term blue blood was used throughout by several college basketball writers in reference to ranked teams. In a December 1951 edition of the Cincinnati Enquirer, Bill Ford previewed an upcoming game between the Xavier Musketeers and the Ball State Cardinals, writing, "The Muskies have trimmed Hanover, Chase, and John Carroll at home to account for their 3 victories in 7 starts. Losses were dished out by Eastern Kentucky, Indiana, Kentucky, and Western Kentucky, all of whom are numbered in college basketball's blue blood directory." But when did the term change to its more modern context? Well, the term, much like many words, just kind of naturally evolved. Kind of like words, like awful, that took much more of its connotation meaning than its original Old English meaning of full of awe or something awe-inspiring, because several teams were appearing over and over again as the best in the country. Those teams were regularly called blue bloods, and the term kind of stuck to them. Since 1949, when the modern era of the AP poll began, the teams that have accumulated the most points all time in the poll are Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke, UCLA, Kansas, Indiana, Louisville, Arizona, Syracuse, and Cincinnati. But over time, people started including national championships in the conversation of blue bloods, and the dividing line seems to be more than 2 national titles. There's nothing official about this reasoning, but the teams with 3 or more national titles trend to have titles over several decades instead of a period of great basketball in history. And remember this part, over several decades, because we'll come back to it. These teams include UCLA, Kentucky, North Carolina, Connecticut, Duke, Indiana, Kansas, and Villanova. Now, you may have heard some repeat names between those lists, and those teams are Kentucky, North Carolina, Duke, UCLA, Kansas, and Indiana. And those teams tend to be the teams that everyone basically agrees are blue bloods. So straight up, there's little to no debate on these teams listed. And some of the top college basketball writers, like Matt Norlander, agree. But Matt Norlander has also said another team should be considered a blue blood without debate, and that's UConn. After the UConn Huskies won a national title in 2023, in his article from CBS Sports, Matt Norlander made a case to include UConn in the blue blood category. Norlander stated, UConn is all the way back and has firmed up its blue blood status. This matter is considered officially closed. The program is back to the top of the sport, and it belongs among the best. It's won a national title in the 90s, 2000s, 2010s, and 2020s, the past 4 decades accounted for. Norlander also stated, the Huskies joined fellow blue bloods Kentucky, UNC, and Kansas as the only programs to win a national championship with 3 different head coaches. The Huskies have as many national championships as Duke and Indiana. They have more than Kansas, Villanova, Louisville, and on and on. And Norlander's argument is not without merit. Even if we look at the historic rankings criteria, UConn is within 100 points all time of the top 10 teams of the AP poll. And the teams between them and the top 10 have not won a national championship since 2000 at the earliest and the 1960s at the latest. So if you consider UConn a blue blood, then you may add an additional piece of criteria: sustained success over decades, or rather championships over decades. And the debate is perfectly reasonable. As Andy Witchery points out, today's debates about who is and isn't a men's basketball blue blood aren't new. Not even close. So what's our criteria for a blue blood? 1. Consistently ranked among the best in the country. 2. Multiple national championships, typically 3 or more. 3. National championships spread over decades of success, if you include UConn. But are these the only rules? Well, maybe, but maybe not. Again, as Witchery points out, no one's in charge, of course, so there are no cut and dried rules. So we only present these arguments and elements as more or less guidelines on the topic, given the term's historical context and how the term has evolved over time. We know that the term was used to describe the elite class or nobility in history. We know that the term originated primarily out of rankings, and we know that national titles have been a big consideration in many arguments. But several teams will pop up in the conversation at times. Michigan State, Arizona, Michigan, Villanova, and several others. And because no one makes any hard rules on this, there are arguments. Some with merit, and some, well, and as Witchery concludes, while the definition and membership list of men's basketball's blue bloods are in flux, whichever Final Four participant adds a 4th, 6th, or 7th national championship to its trophy case, it'll certainly renew its membership application to the Sports Club of Blue Bloods, thanks to a shiny new trophy. So we kind of went through a mess there just to come back around and say the same thing. There's not a hardline definition of the term, but we do know it's elite, and people generally agree that certain teams are one. So, if you're a new fan, I hope this at least gives you a broad understanding of the topic. And if you can remember that these teams are historically elite and are consistent champions, you'll be set. Until next time, thank you guys for checking out this video. If you're enjoying the series, please like and subscribe to the channel. And be sure to check out the weekly show on Tuesday mornings. In the next College Basketball 201 video, what is a mid-major? See you soon.